Well, good evening.
Amen.
Wow, this is an amazing class. This is about all the room this room can handle. So it's exciting, very exciting that all of you keep coming back. I hope that'll continue to be the case next week. Arthur is up, and Joan, I think so, and then Andy. So yeah, so I'm going to continue our discussion, and we are this series, this 6-part series that we're doing is based on a book titled "Faith After Doubt" by Brian McLaren. I'm just curious, anybody actually reading the book? Has anybody been reading the book? I just okay, Janet. So a few of you. So, all right. Well, that helps me to know. Okay. I will say this one thing that I appreciate about the book is that Brian McLaren offers a lot of nuance, just about everything he says, and that's important to me. We're presenting the 4 stages that he describes in the book, and we've got an hour to do it. So when we make our presentation, we don't have a lot of time for nuance, but he offers a lot of it in his book, which I think will be helpful, because sometimes when I hear something, I'm like, yeah, but, and he answers a lot of the yeah, but kind of questions that I guess, am I supposed to be visible in this screen the whole time? Or
Whoever's at home, I don't know if there's anybody at home today, but
all right, I just want to make so I'm seeing half my face. I'm seeing half my face, but I got it better now. But I want to see my notes too. All right, so tonight we're going to look at stage 2 of the stages of faith, as outlined by Brian McLaren. Paige kicked us off last week, and she talked about how Brian McLaren is drawing from a lot of psychologists, philosophers, developmental psychiatrists, people who have written about stages of growth, particularly when it comes to children, adolescents, and even adults. And he has developed this schema, applying it to faith development. And last week, Paige, starting us off on the 4 stages, talked about the stage of simplicity. I'm going to talk about stage 2 tonight, which is identified as complexity. So, but I want to do a quick review just to make sure that we can remember what we talked about last week. So last week was the stage of simplicity. What were some characteristics of stage 1? Faith. Okay. All right. Okay. Very clear answers. Authoritarian. Yeah, authoritarian. Okay. Well, yeah. So dualistic thinking, that's that good, bad, right or wrong, very authoritarian, and that sort of thing. And Brian McLaren identified that stage generally as being a stage that's common to everyone from about ages 2 to 12. And we talked about how this is a necessary stage on so many levels. This is how we get our start in life. Where it might become an issue is if you're, 40 years old and you're still kind of operating out of that mentality. And I was talking to Arthur Holt just a few minutes ago. One of the interesting things about this 4-part schema that I've appreciated, I've kind of looked back over some folks that I've known. I've served a lot of churches. I guess I should have identified myself, by the way. I'm Cam Treece, and I'm the senior pastor of this church. Sometimes I just walk up here like, hey, I'm just talking. But I've served, this is my 6th or 7th church that I've served as a pastor. So I've known a lot of people over the years, and this 4-part schema has reminded me of some people I've known. And I was telling Arthur, I've known some people who are very sophisticated. They're very intelligent, like medical doctors, PhDs. But when it came to things they've said about God and their faith, they were stage 1. And so, none of this really has anything to do with intelligence or anything like that. I've known some people who in some parts of life, some areas of life, very sophisticated, very complex. But then when it comes to their faith, they will think very, very simplistic and very stage 1. And that's always surprised me, but kind of reading through some of this, I'm starting to maybe understand a little bit more about how that's possible. All right, so that's stage 1. So stage 2, complexity, is what we are going to look at tonight. I want to read a statement by him found on page 43, and it's about doubt. So one of the common themes throughout this book is the role of doubt, and that doubt is key. Doubt is what enables us or starts to open the door for us to move from one stage to another. Often in the church, doubt is portrayed as something very negative, a bad quality, something to stay away from. Whereas here, doubt is actually understood in a very positive way that fosters growth, spiritual growth, and maybe growth in other ways. And so here's the statement. It's on page 43. This is McLaren. He says, doubt, it turns out, is the passageway from each stage to the next. Without doubt, there can be growth within a stage, but growth from one stage to another usually requires us to doubt the assumptions that give shape to our current stage. So doubt is a major player in all of this. And it's only through doubt, as he says here, that we begin to question where the current stage we find ourselves in. The assumptions that we make that characterize, say, stage 1, we start to doubt some of those assumptions. And as I've thought about this, I would say, at least in my life, and probably in your life as well, doubt arose from encounters that I would have with other people. So the older I got, particularly when I went to college for me was an experience where all of a sudden I was encountering people that in some ways were quite different from the ones that I grew up with in good old Anderson County. Small little bubble there, and I can't say that a lot of that was positive, but we have encounters with other people. We have experiences in life. We read books, authors. We encounter ideas, and in encountering those ideas, we all of a sudden find ourselves doubting some things that we've always taken for granted. And so that's a very powerful role, I think, that doubt plays in our lives. And as we get older, he says that most people start to hit stage 2 complexity, probably their early teenage years, 12 and beyond. He says he was, Brian McLaren says he was fully, I guess, engrossed into stage 2 complexity by the time he was 20. But that's where he fully and completely was. And so as you get older, sometimes reality, as you are experiencing it, doesn't fit neatly into stage 1 simplicity. And one of the things that he points out is that a lot of that starts to occur in adolescence. Our bodies are changing, hormones, lots of stuff that's going on doesn't quite fit so neatly into those stage 1 simplistic categories. And all of a sudden we find ourselves doubting some assumptions. So McLaren in his book, he says there are three main what I want to call them, I guess, categories, experiences that he encountered as an adolescent that caused him to start this process of doubt and started to move him out of stage one and into stage two. And he said those three categories, one was sex, the other one had to do with facts, knowledge, and then the third one was rock and roll. And those three, he called it a trifecta, started to push him out of stage one. Sex, of course, was in his home and in his church wasn't even talked about. And if it was usually in some very negative way. So he's a teenager now, all of that's starting to bubble up. Facts, he says, he's in school, he's encountering new ideas like evolution and things that he hadn't heard of before. History, he's learning history and things that are starting to really corrode his previous assumptions. And then rock and roll. And what's really interesting about that is that third branch of that trifecta is the one that I could identify with the most. And I'm going to share that with you in a moment, because one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do here in just a second is to turn to a partner, just one person, can be anybody, but just one person. And I'm going to ask you to think back and to share something that started you to have doubts about whatever it was you believed at the time. And you started to kind of question things that you had never questioned before. So I'm going to ask you to do that in a minute, but while you're thinking of your own stuff, I'll give you an example from mine. So it was rock and roll. I'm a huge rock fan. So those of you who've heard me in sermons know that, so much so that I've made sure that I've educated my children in that genre. I have literally taken my children to see Guns N' Roses in a football stadium, AC/DC, Kiss, Def Leppard, and probably some others, because I wanted them to know what music was like before Britney Spears. I hope, Paige, I hope I'm not offending. Britney, your favorite. She's about your. Anyway, I wanted them to, or Justin Bieber, I wanted them to know that there was a time when musicians actually wrote their own music, played their own music, and it was all from them. So anyway, but here's my story. So when I was in youth, I was very young. This might have been my first year in youth group, maybe seventh grade. We went on a retreat. Our youth group went on a retreat. And I grew up in a Methodist church, but this was not a Methodist. It's like a non-denominational camp. And I don't remember much about the weekend, but one night the presentation was centered around rock music, regular music. And all I was hearing was negative stuff. Satan, this is all satanic. The Eagles, I saw the Eagles in concert. Love their music. Well, Hotel California's got backmasking, and that's the devil, and all this stuff. And most of the kids around me, they're like, yeah, and they're like, you shouldn't be listening to that garbage. And there's contemporary Christian rock now. You should be listening to that. What was the big first contemporary rock band that kind of came out at that time? No, it was long before then. No, that Christian band. Oh, I'm trying to think of this band that was like the first Christian rock band to really come out. Petra. Anybody ever heard? And I said, Petra. I said, that's garbage. And they're like, where the lyrics are Christian based. I'm like, yeah, but they're second class. I said, I like Led Zeppelin, and they don't even, I couldn't buy it. And they were like, you need to burn your CDs. And I'm like, I am not burning Hotel California. Anyway, I totally rejected all of that. And my friends were all excited about it. And yeah, we're going to a Petra concert. And I'm like, you can go to a Petra concert. I'm not listening to that. And I never could listen to contemporary Christian radio. Even though there's some bands like Jars of Clay. I mean, there's some that actually had some quality to them. But anyway, that was a watershed moment for me. And I didn't say it like to the presenter. Some of my best friends around me, I was like no. I said no. I didn't stand up and say y'all are crazy. Uh, yeah, and Striper and versus Van Halen, no competition. And I'm running with the devil. I'm sorry, but I couldn't buy into Ozzy Osbourne. Staying with Ozzy. I'm sorry. All right, so I want you to turn to somebody, and I want you to turn to the person next to you, and just say, when was a moment you had an experience that caused you to question and doubt where you were in your church and faith? All right. Well, we'll move on, but I hope that was fruitful for you to have those conversations with someone, because I'm guessing most of us had some experience, maybe early on, where all of a sudden some cracks in the wall started to form in terms of where we were in our faith or what we were being taught in church. And we actually began to doubt some of the things that the authority figures were telling us, that wasn't quite fitting in with our experience of reality. The importance of that about doubt is for Brian McLaren, doubt is what takes you from each stage to the next. So doubt is an ever-present factor in his schema here on how we grow in our faith. Usually it's some kind of event that creates some doubt about where we are. All right, so I want to move into stage 2, which is complexity. We'll talk a little bit about some characteristics of stage 2. And maybe those of you who are reading the book could even jump in and add a few more. So with stage 2, you do begin to realize everything is not black and white, that there are many shades of gray, and that things aren't so simple. And you began to see life on more of a spectrum than just kind of binary zeros and ones, yes and no, dualistic, that you could take just about any kind of issue, including faith, and see it on a spectrum. And it's not so neat and tidy. Complexity recognizes multiple options, and that includes with understanding the Bible. So he talks about how when he was into that stage, someone invited him to a Bible study where they were actually encouraging people to raise questions and to offer different perspectives. He was used to going to a Bible study where there was an authoritarian leader, a pastor or youth leader, or somebody who would say, here's the scripture we're reading, and this is how you are to understand it. Now he had been invited to a Bible study where there was no real leader, more of a facilitator, who was actually encouraging everyone to look at the scripture they were studying from different perspectives. And they were being encouraged to read commentators of scripture from different faith traditions, academics, even reading philosophers, and allowing other disciplines to come in to the study of scripture and try to. So for him, it was liberating. So freedom is one of the characteristics of this stage as well, and it feels good. The self-learning and self-discovery, exploration is a part of this stage. It's a stage of independence compared to the dependency that is fostered in stage 1. More independent. Growth is kind of seen as the goal more than a particular end. Growth is the end. Just experiencing growth in your faith and in your understanding of God and the Bible. But there's other features to it that he draws out. One is pragmatism, that stage 2 is usually the stage of pragmatism and utility, which means that compared to stage 1, where you're so focused on right or wrong, stage 2 thinking is more along the lines of what works for me, how do I get to a different place. And so that's in competition. Competition is a part of this stage as well, which, as we know, when we hit those teenage years, we start to compare ourselves to one another. And we start to make judgments that maybe we didn't. So he said, he says for as far as categories go, in terms of this pragmatism, in your academic subjects, will I get A's or C's or F's? Will I succeed in math or language or history? So these become the primary concerns. What works, or will I succeed? He said, among your peers, will I be popular? Will I be unpopular, liked or ignored, respected or made fun of? In your own body, how will I negotiate the rapid changes I see and feel? And how will I grapple with my adult body, its height, weight, shape, strength, hair, skin, sexuality? How will I fare in romantic relationships? Will I be successful in romantic relationships? Spiritually, as well. So it's also a stage that is characterized by success and competition, which makes it kind of interesting. And McLaren says that in this stage, we often begin to see life as a game, or life as a multitude of games. And what we become most concerned about is how well can I play the rules of these games? And again, that would be, say, school, for instance, right? School has rules. You can look at it as a game. You can look at your job as a game. That's easy to do. And in this stage, we move out of that simplistic thinking and we began to see things. How can I play the game and succeed, and separate myself from the pack, and all those kind of things that you begin to think about or worry about when you move into adolescence, young adulthood. In young adulthood, even more so, because you graduated from college, you've chosen your field, and now you want to prove that you can be a success in your field. 20s can be very stressful and try to prove yourself. So these are all part of the stage 2 project of complexity. What's important in that stage is not so much right or wrong, good or bad, but developing skills, discovering your talents, playing to your talents, playing to your strengths, developing skill sets, and those type of things. So in stage 1, the adult figures, the people that you looked up to, so to speak, were authority figures, and we talked about that. Stage 1 is represented by authority figures. In stage 2, you're looking not so much for those type of authoritarian figures, but you're looking for coaches. In stage 2, the best people in your life, as far as older people, will be people who are like a coach to you, like a mentor. And he says that parents who are in stage 2 complexity appreciate and recognize the importance of other adults being coaches and mentors to their own children, versus where stage 1 parenting might always fear the other and not really wanting their children to be there, suspicious of anybody who might have an influence. But stage 2 parents welcome other adults, coaches, mentors. Did somebody have a hand raised back here? Hey, I thought maybe you were.
As long as we can choose the coaches.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure in adolescence you will choose your coaches. But you are that you're looking for that, because what does a coach do? A coach's job is to help bring the best out of you, to help you become successful, to help you discover your strengths and to develop those strengths. And that's what you're looking for. You're wanting to be successful in the games of life. And you understand that usually involves complexity, very little that's simple in all of that. So those are some characteristics of stage 2 thinking. McLaren says he was thoroughly in stage 2 by the time he was 20 and spent 20 years in that stage, which I doubt is uncommon. Honestly, I can kind of look at that. It kind of aligns in many ways with my life as well. So having said that, what would you say are some of the positive qualities of stage 2 complexity?
We want to spend.
Okay, that there's many ways to interpret something, including the Bible. That's exciting. Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, good. Other positive qualities that you can see in stage 2.
Sometimes we're less fearful, I think, and because we're less fearful, we need control. I think the more fearful people are, the more they need control. So I'm going to make all these. So we're more open to what people bring to us or to children.
Yeah.
Repeat that, Adam.
Well, so in stage 1, a lot of things are more fear driven. In stage 2, we're open. We're not fear driven. We're open. We don't feel the need to control. Is that kind of, yeah, kind of, that's very positive. Yeah, Joan.
Beginning to see these things really make a lot of sense, but in an atmosphere where you can really wrestle with down and new ways of seeing things and new ideas, and I absolutely loved that, and it changed my life forever. I've never been in a place like I was at that particular time in my life, where I read as much, thought as much, wrestled, doubted, in a place that everybody we were with was doing the same thing. So these are people that are still important in our lives this many years later.
Yeah. Thank you.
I probably need to go back and do stage 2. When I finished college, I had the answer.
You still have.
I knew what.
That's stage 1.
I had the answers for everything.
Yeah, and I can relate to some of that. And my kids, I don't know, when they got to be that age, I got real dumb. But now they're getting older now, towards their 30s, where all of a sudden I'm getting smarter again. So funny how that works. Yeah, so that's good. So what would be some of the negative characteristics of stage 2? This one's going to be harder, but I'm going to bring it out for us in a moment. You may need to go back and think about some of the things I said. Pragmatism, competition, utilitarianism.
Spent probably 40 to 50 years in that talent stage before I been able to find something that felt right. I struggled more than 20 years.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah, that is a long time.
Okay, you said something about negative.
Yeah, what are some negative qualities or characteristics of stage two?
I don't think competition would actually be a negative.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Competition can take over. It can become the driving force of people's lives, so that where winning is everything, which has become a major illness in our culture. Winning, every other value gets pushed aside, whether it's winning the most, who has the most money, whoever has the most toys wins, remember that
Yeah.
one? Well, and here we, whoever has the most money, the most toys, the most it can distort our whole value system.
good. Yeah, Arthur?
I'm just thinking about, in my own journey, once you open up the possibility that it's not all black and white, you open Pandora's box, all kinds of possibilities. And I think that's what probably led me into perplexity. Because I had so many things thrown at me that I was trying to, and they all were equally valid. So I think that's a possible
Overwhelmed.
thing.
LA?
I think fear to an extent because of what you've got to learn and question, doubt, and what you learned coming out of that. My family, was very strict Baptist, and just fear of when you talk to them. When I talked to them at the time, what were they going to think? They didn't exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, those Thanksgiving dinner conversations. Yeah, Mitch. Oh, yeah. Hey, Robin, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Right, we're
Mhm.
stepping into complexity and start seeing the world gray, and you don't have anybody to guide you through that, it's real quick. I would say it's real easy for a lot of people to be like, never mind, I'm not a part of this, but this doesn't make any sense anymore.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and I can see, let's say that you were very active in a church that is very stage one, authoritarian. You go off to college, you encounter some new ideas. Now you're starting to think differently, or you're having that doubt. And then Christmas break, you come back home to that church. Well, who do you talk to about that? Who do you express that to? Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you're like, well, yeah. And I have talked to, I do a lot of hiking. That's one of my passions is hiking. I do a lot of it. And I hike with some different hiking groups. And when you do that, when you hike with hiking groups, you encounter a lot of different kinds of people. And I've had some really interesting conversations. And so I've met some of these folks who have they've lost their faith completely. I mean, I know one person, she was like, I wish I could have faith. I miss the church, I miss the fellowship, but I just can't accept it anymore. And part of the problem was she was raised in a church where that form of Christianity was presented as this is the only valid Christianity. So when she went off to school and started having life experiences, none of those matched. So she just kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater because she didn't know that there was progressive Christianity or she'd never encountered that before. All she had was this. Life didn't fit with this, so Christianity must be completely wrong. And of course, me being Methodist and who I am, I started to kind of share my beliefs and my experiences. And she was like, wow, I had no idea that you could be a Christian or a pastor and think that way. It's just the way she was raised. Yes.
That week, opened more of possibilities for mankind than he could for that church. And then through Carter and hostages and Reagan and all of that being such a part of diversity, not really like people who were in high school during 9/11. You know, for me, that was something that was so present. Because I studied political science and college, that those things may be more concerned about Ed, or where that fits with this. Yeah, then granddaddy called me dad. I told Dan, your granddaddy called me Dad and Thomas from the time I was little. And that was okay, because, you know, that was fine to them. So I never had a question about whether or not I could ask or we could respond. That was always fun. But then you start looking at our world, at the future,
Yeah, I would probably associate 1984 more with stage one. Totalitarianism is kind of what I maybe, but that's good though. There's so many television shows I've watched that hit like The Handmaid's Tale. Anybody ever watch The Handmaid's Tale? Yeah, Joy, you watch that, Robbie? Yeah, that will really shake you up. That will shake you up. Well, anyway, let's continue. So I want to say a little bit more about the downside of stage two, because I think we understand the positives, which there are a lot. Stage two, in my opinion, is a very positive stage. It's exciting. You have a lot of freedom to just absorb and absorb and absorb. And, you know, what do the arts say about God? What does science say? What does politics and what does philosophy? I mean, it's just, you could just go on. So there's a lot of energy there and a lot of excitement. But here's the part that can be quite negative. And it has to do with this pragmatism, this utilitarian mentality that often goes along with it, along the lines of, well, what works for me? And that can work its way into the Christian message, the gospel, if you will. Basically your faith and God becomes a means to a greater end, and the end is success. So for instance, I'm thinking about what's called the prosperity gospel. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. That is there are a lot of churches that fall under that category. Some of the best known TV preachers, and I've worked with people when I was at Verizon. I worked with a lot of people that went to a church in Greenville. The Apostle Ron ran the church, and I went there one time. It's Pentecostal. Somebody invited me. I said, "Yeah, I'll go." Anyway, you know, it's the prosperity gospel message. Basically, God wants you to be wealthy, middle class, and have the American dream. But that's God's real will and purpose for your life. And if you kind of follow my understanding of how the gospel works, you can bet on obtaining that. So you see how that takes the gospel message and turns it into a tool, a utility for gaining something beyond just, you know, union with God or faith or whatever you're looking for, but it turns it into that. And it definitely appeals to a lot of people, particularly people that are down and out. Um, a lot of folks who kind of are on the lower socioeconomic level of things really pull into that because they're looking for hope. You know, life is tough. They keep going through dead end jobs and life is tough and they're trying to pay their bills and you know, they can't make it. And a lot of, I knew a lot of these people, they never got any better financially. Their pastor seemed to do quite well financially, but they didn't. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and this brings us to the issue of disillusion. A lot of these, let's see, I've even written down some examples here. Yeah. So also the other part of this utilitarian pragmatic approach is using Christianity for just improving anything that is important to you. So for instance, you've probably ran across books, and of course you see this in the self-help section, but people in the religious faith community have jumped on this bandwagon. The five rules for a healthy marriage, the 5 ways to beat depression, the 5 ways to be successful in whatever. And for the last 20-25 years, that has been, and I myself, if I don't want to say this necessarily bad, but because I was about to say I'm guilty of that some of myself. I mean, I spent a lot of time at stage 2 and have often thought of Christianity in a very pragmatic way, and it's easy to twist it that way, and that sells a lot of books. But that's another aspect of this, the dark side, if you will, of complexity. The shadow side is that things can be turned into tools and steps to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. So a couple of people that I think maybe you've heard of that fit into these categories. So when it comes to the prosperity gospel, Joel Osteen is somebody that, and I'm not trying to offend anybody if you like him. I've listened to Joel Osteen. I think he's a great motivational speaker, but couldn't call him a Christian pastor. That's just my opinion. Not hearing the gospel there, but I'm hearing some good motivation. And he probably would do a great job on the book of Proverbs, but it's that approach. It's that approach. And his church has, he's in an arena, Houston Rockets old arena, 14,000 people fill up his church every week. So he's a pretty popular guy. The one who I picked out for this understanding of, you know, how the gospel is presented, it's 10 steps to this and 12 ways to that, and how you can improve this and stuff, is Rick Warren. Anybody remember Rick Warren's big book that sold 40 million copies? What was it titled? Purpose Driven Life. And I don't want to knock this book, and I don't want to knock him too much. I read the book and I thought, okay, there's some truth to this. There's some truth to this. But again, it's trying to package the gospel into one of these self-help type of schemas that, I mean, I read the book. I couldn't tell you a thing about it today. Yeah, Penny. Oh, yeah. The prayer of Jabez. That's prosperity gospel. And yeah, and I knew a lot of people told me to read that book. Maybe I got a raise. I don't know. Maybe it worked. So those are just examples, and I'm not trying to beat anybody up. If you like those folks, that's okay. Just maybe kind of know, you know, be more aware of what they're selling. Here's some of the downfalls of it. These folks who say, if you understand the gospel this way, or the Bible, or you follow my teachings, what happens when they fall or they fail? What happens? What happens to their followers?
They're disillusioned.
They're disillusioned. They're disillusioned. yeah, if if those 10 steps and 20 steps didn't work for him or her, then why am why am I following that? This is what he or she taught, and now, I thought of, I had one example for that. That was Jimmy Swaggart. Anybody remember the fall of Jimmy Swaggart? Yeah. We could name some others. What was the guy in Charlotte? Jim Baker. Jim and Tammy. Jim and Tammy. Tammy moved on, didn't she? She moved on. All right. Oh, Billy Graham's interesting because, I think he's an example of where age can be a blessing, because as he got older, he changed. And I'm not saying he moved into stage 3 or 4, but he changed a lot from his earliest days and started embracing groups that at one time he would have never been associated with. So I don't know where he fits into that. Yeah, I wouldn't call Billy Graham a prosperity theologian. I think he stayed away from that, and he, as far as I know, lived a very simplistic life in North Carolina. So yeah, I'm not sure where to put him. That's what I'm saying. You live to be that old, maybe you can change a lot. Evolve. Maybe you can evolve. So I want to kind of close with this. So there's good stuff, the complexity, some downsides as well. And here's one thing that Brian McLaren talks about, is that when it comes to complexity, moving from stage 2 complexity to stage 3 perplexity, which Arthur will be talking about next week, often involves a crisis of faith. A crisis of faith. And I think you could just say a life crisis in general, because usually when you have a true life crisis, it kind of impacts everything, including your faith, but not just your faith. It's a whole Titanic, and not just pieces of something. And this is something that I can relate to, and so we'll kind of close with this. I think there's a lot of truth to that it is a life crisis that will often push you out of stage 2. And I don't want to necessarily say that being in stage 2 is a terrible thing. I mean, honestly, if you stay in stage 2 your whole life, as long as you understand the pitfalls and you have some self-awareness about it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not like you've got to graduate to these other stages. I think that doesn't really work with human nature. So I don't want to, but as far as moving into perplexity, spiritual crisis, and so I'll give a personal example of that. So I was very much a pastor of stage 2 complexity, and I preached a lot of sermons that really focused on a pragmatic view of Christianity, and how to improve your mental health and live a better life, and relationships, and in marriage, and raising children. I mean, I was all into a lot of that. And then, as some of you know, in my early 40s, I had a crisis. And there were a lot of facets to it, but I ended up very abruptly quitting the ministry. After 17 years of being a senior pastor, I'd been at this church for 7 years, and on paper, I was very successful. Everybody was shocked that this happened, because everything looked great. Church was growing, money, all that good stuff that we like, the success of complexity, all that looked really good. But on the inside, I was empty and hollow, and probably sold my soul to the devil along the way, and it just caught up with me. And so I called my district superintendent on a Friday, and I said, I need to come see you immediately. And he said, well, I can work you in next Wednesday. And I said, Charles, I said, it's Charles Johnson. I said, Charles, I'm quitting effective immediately. I will not be in church Sunday. And he was like, oh. And I left and I quit, and I was never coming back. I was never coming back. I got rid of 90% of my books, which ministers usually have large libraries, got rid of that. And I was never coming back. I didn't go to church anymore. I didn't go to church for several years. I didn't open the Bible. I didn't pray. I felt distant from God. And I didn't want anything to do with any of it. And I've shared other things. I went into, I was diagnosed with chronic depression, became an alcoholic. And so all that pragmatic Christianity I preached for all those years didn't even work for me. And I was totally disillusioned with, my brand of faith, if you will, or my understanding. And part of it was, for me, I'm a very cerebral kind of person. I spend a lot of time in my head. And that was kind of the extent of my relationship with God, or my faith. It was a head trip. I thought about God. That's what I did, and probably produced some interesting sermons and so forth. But it didn't do much for me on a more experiential level, which is what I was missing as well. And so I didn't want to think about God anymore, and that has stayed with me. Obviously, after 6 years, I felt that I was well enough and healthy enough, and it moved through some of this perplexity to a healthy stage. Lo and behold, I felt like I wanted to go back into the ministry, but I'm not the same person at all. I still don't really want to think a lot about God anymore. I want to experience God. And I guess when we get into the harmony of love, experiencing God through real life love, I don't want to steal thunder or anything, so I'll stop there. But I know in my case, that rocked me out of, and it's not that I've just thrown stage 2 away. There's still plenty of good. I mean, exploring other things and dimensions to your faith, and that openness and that freedom, that energy, all of that's good. So I'm not saying you always throw away your previous stage, but there are certain, the downside to complexity I became disillusioned with, and just went through a real crisis. I had to go before the Board of Ordained Ministry. Always a pleasant experience, and they grilled me. And one of them said, "Are you having a faith crisis or a spiritual crisis?" I said, "I guess I am." Yeah, Paige, if you quit, you don't want to go. You have to go before the board, but it's not something you look forward to. All right. So that's where I'm going to end us, with this idea that it spiritual crisis, but a spiritual crisis, as horrible as it is, and I don't want to. I mean, I wish I didn't go through it, because it was that bad, and it affected my marriage, my relationship with my children. I mean, I did a lot of damage and harm through those years, and I cannot minimize the reality of that. So I live with deep regret, but I can say that a spiritual crisis over time can move you and blossom into something that is actually good for you. All right, I'll stop there. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Thank you.
If I might say, I've worked with Cam and back in this church. You see a lot of God's actions. And I mean, from Cam, for you to come back where you are now, affirms my faith in God a lot.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Who?
I started, what brought you back?
Quick answer. I'll give you a quick answer. So I was working at a telecommunications company. I'd gotten several promotions. I was up for another one, and I started to think long term. I'm like, okay, this might be my career. I only took this job because I needed quick medical benefits for my family. I didn't plan on staying here more than 3 or 6 months. I mean, we're talking about customer service. I mean, nobody. You ask a 5-year-old kid, what do you want to be when they grow up? I want to be a customer service representative. No, so it was just a stopgap job. I needed insurance. Mine was about to run out with the church anyway. I took the job. Well, all of a sudden, I was in my 5th year there, and I was like, well, this has turned into a career, and I was doing well in it. And like I said, up for another promotion, and I started thinking I could finish out the next 15 years here. And all of a sudden, I started having this gnawing thing inside my gut that said, no, this is not how you want to finish this out. While you still have health and breath and energy, and this is not your true calling. Just a lot of stuff. It was long-term thinking. I started thinking about, gosh, this is the end. I mean, I'm actually looking at another 15 years in retirement, and this is it. It's about over. And that just really shook me to the core. And I just started sensing that call of, you need to come back to the church, and that this is not where you need to finish. In a nutshell, that's what brought me back, was that moment for me.
Thank you, Cam.
All right. Well, thank y'all. Arthur will be up next week.